talk about actually I gotta.
Governor's not doing
Who? Well, we talked to him earlier today.
I'm sure that went over well. All right.
Subdued.
Just state your first and last name. You want to start?
Okay. Everybody ready? Okay. I'm Jason, LAMM. To my right is David Don, DON. And this is Farragut, his own last name. On September 18th of 2015, Leslie Merritt Jr. was arrested for a series of heinous crimes he didn't commit. His arrest was the culmination of a botched investigation, a wrongful arrest, and a malicious prosecution. As we stand here today, there is no evidence whatsoever to suggest that Leslie Merritt is the I-10 shooter, that he ever has been, or that he ever will be. Phoenix is absolutely no safer than it was at the time of Merritt's arrest. The Department of Public Safety and the County Attorney's Office, they perpetrated a public relations stunt to con the public with no evidence whatsoever to legally support Mr. Merritt's arrest, and that resulted in the dismissal of all of the charges against him last April. Now you'll notice Leslie is not here today, and a lot of you have asked, where is he? Well, Leslie's being a father, he's being a good employee, and he's trying to get back to the very private and simple life that he once had. It's been extremely difficult for him. There's a lot of emotional difficulties he's facing. Emotional difficulties that are very hard to get over, and he's been severely damaged. People still confront him in the street. He told me that just last week a man wanted to fight him while Leslie was out with his children. He's had a very difficult time and will continue to do so. Also missing today is the name of Governor Doug Ducey from the lawsuit. Now, while we did name the governor in the notice of claim, we made a conscious decision not to make him a defendant in this lawsuit. Obviously, as you all know, this was based on the tweet that the governor sent out just minutes after Mr. Merritt's arrest. The tweet was wrong. We believe it's something that shouldn't have been done. And respectfully, we believe that in hindsight, if the governor had the opportunity to do it over again, he wouldn't have sent that tweet. But at the end of the day, it comes down to an error in judgment. We believe it is something which is actionable and which could be included in this case, but we sat down and we recognized and we realized that millions of dollars, taxpayer dollars, have been spent on the botched investigation, the wrongful arrest, and the malicious prosecution, and we just don't think it's appropriate for the taxpayers to have to foot the bill for basically what amounts to a split-second error in judgment on the part of the governor. So that's why the governor is not included in the lawsuit. There's an extremely strong likelihood that he will still be a witness, but we have made a decision not to make him a defendant and to focus our energies and our efforts on the parties that committed the most heinous wrongdoing, that being the Department of Public Safety and the County Attorney's Office. Ulysses and I represented Leslie on the criminal case. We are very much involved in the civil case, but we brought in David Don, who's standing to my right. David is an experienced trial attorney. He focuses his practice on civil rights violations and police misconduct. And frankly, he's the architect of the lawsuit that was filed yesterday. So I am going to step aside, let David talk to you a little bit about the complaint, and he can answer any questions in that regard.
Thank you. Thank you, Jason. Thank you. The complaint was filed yesterday, and it named the state of Arizona, which is responsible for the administration of the Department of Public Safety and the crime lab that works for DPS. It also named the Maricopa County Attorney Bill Montgomery, who oversaw the attempt to criminally prosecute and convict Leslie Merritt, an attempt that was completely unsuccessful, and the criminal case has been dismissed. It also names, finally, Maricopa County, which may have some control over the employees at the Maricopa County Attorney's Office. The complaint is divided, if you'll notice, into various counts, various legal theories that govern, that address each of the stages of this failed prosecution against Leslie Merritt. The state was wrong. The state attempted to convict an innocent person. The evidence against Leslie Merritt was completely lacking. He was completely innocent and is innocent of being the freeway shooter. The civil complaint and the civil case is designed to vindicate Leslie Merritt for the harm that was done to him. And we intend to show the public that this legal system that was wrongfully used to attempt to convict an innocent father and an innocent man can be used for a noble purpose of bringing about justice for Leslie Merritt, and to bring the police and the prosecutors to hold them to task.
Again, the original claim was for $10 million. Is there a monetary amount on the lawsuit itself, or is that strictly up to the jury? Where does that stand?
Yeah, so the notice of claim requires that we include a specific amount. The complaint, however, that was filed yesterday does not allow us, the court rules do not allow us to put a specific number in there. What we will take into account when we present this case to the jury is the level of wrong that the state and the county attorney did against Leslie Merritt. The number of times that they had the opportunity to shut down this criminal prosecution. The number of times that they twisted evidence, that they failed to disclose evidence. And the jury needs to take that into account and hold them accountable. We'll also take into account that Leslie Merritt is an innocent man. He's a father. He's a landscaper. He loves to work outdoors, to feel the sun on his skin and the wind in his hair. And the state and the prosecutors took him and they put him in a box for 222 days. He was locked in 23 hours a day. His life has been turned upside down. He's been maligned by the governor of Arizona, by the head of DPS, Frank Milstead, and the county attorney without any basis. So the state of Arizona and the prosecutors probably spent millions of dollars in an attempt to convict an innocent man. I would suggest to the jury that that's a starting place. If the state values prosecuting an innocent man so much, perhaps that's something that the citizens of Arizona should take into account when trying to determine how much this case is worth, to make sure that it doesn't happen to anyone else.
You say Bill Montgomery knew there was no evidence to support the prosecution. Can you point to something specific he knew he ignored?
What the Department of Public Safety and the prosecutors knew was almost immediately that Leslie Merritt's gun was not used in incident number 4. That Leslie Merritt's gun was not in his possession, that it was in a pawn shop for at least 4 hours before that shooting occurred. And there was a physical impossibility that Leslie Merritt's gun could be used in one of the crimes here.
David, let me add a point, because sure. And let me add one point. They knew the gun was in the pawn shop, but the key to this is that the DPS crime lab said to a 100% certainty, something that is completely contrary to forensic protocols. They said to a 100% certainty that the gun was used in all the shootings. So if the gun was in the pawn shop for one, it was a house of cards. And when we knew the gun wasn't available for the 4th shooting, and arguably police knew that right away, they knew before they even seized the gun from the pawn shop. They knew it wasn't available. It was a fatal blow to the theory of the case. So what they did, they manipulated the evidence. They tried to talk the driver of the car in that 4th shooting into another timeline. They effectively tried to sandbag their own witness and every single expert that's rendered an opinion in this case. Essentially, as we have since learned since the dismissal of this case back in April, DPS's position from day one has been that they are right and everyone else is wrong.
What's kind of the message? This complaint, this lawsuit says that you can't go around the judicial system, you can't mark them.
message we want to send is that the police and the prosecutors are not above the law. That the principle that everyone can be held accountable when there is wrongdoing. And one more word about the crime lab here. What the DPS representative has testified is that the only evidence linking Leslie Merritt to any crime was their so-called firearm identification. Without a positive firearm identification, they have absolutely nothing. What we know is that they have, in fact, absolutely nothing. And that's not just the lawyers talking for Leslie Merritt. That's based on the subsequent testing that was done on Leslie Merritt's gun. The state and the prosecutors selected the luminaries in this scientific field of firearm identification. And they've all come back unanimously. There is no match. The data does not add up. It's not Leslie Merritt's gun. There's no evidence against it. And yet the crime lab continues to hold on to this belief that they can prove somehow that Leslie Merritt's gun was involved in the shootings, and it just did not happen. Leslie Merritt is innocent.
How many cases like this have you brought against police, prosecutors?
I've been a civil rights attorney for 20 years. I participated in scores of cases against police involving unlawful use of force, wrongful arrest, false prosecution.
I ask because my next question is, so how difficult is it to persuade a jury that what police did was malicious and negligent and intentional, when they might look at it and say, you know what, the cops, the prosecutors, sometimes they make a mistake.
Look, we all need the police. We recognize that. This is not a case against the police. This is a case against poor police work. And what we need more than the police are good police officers, objective investigators, competent scientists who aren't swayed by bias, who don't make awful, terrible mistakes because they're under intense public scrutiny and pressure to end the publicity around this freeway shooting case. That's what we need more than anything else. The people of Maricopa County who ultimately get to decide this case will respect that and understand that this happened today and over the past year to Leslie Merritt, but the consequence of poor police work and poor prosecution can affect everyone.
In your experience, how difficult is it to prove, to make one of these cases, to be successful?
Look, the law favors the police. The law favors the state, and it goes way back in our common law to all the way from England, where there's the concept that the king can do no wrong. That idea comes over in America, but that's not the law. The king can do wrong. The police and prosecutors can do wrong. Yes, we have obstacles to overcome in the legal case against proving that the prosecutors and DPS and state are responsible here. So we're confident that on the facts of this case, we will hold them accountable, and Leslie Merritt will be vindicated.
And Brad, notwithstanding the difficulty of pursuing cases against governmental entities in general, this is a case where the evidence speaks for itself. We are very comfortable with the evidence. The evidence has shown from day one that Leslie Merritt Jr. was not responsible. Unfortunately, the county, the state, they had an agenda. They had a theory, and they needed to invent facts to fit that theory. And they put a round peg in a square hole. But unfortunately, it cost an innocent man 222 days of his life in solitary confinement.
Is DPS still investigating Merritt?
I think that's a great question for DPS.
Have they interviewed him recently? Does he see any surveillance around his house or anything?
You know, maybe it's a difficult situation when somebody's dealing with, PTSD after going through what Leslie has been through. So, yeah. So, it's difficult for anyone to objectively assess what Leslie's going through because it's such an unusual experience. Do we have information, credible information, to suggest that he was under surveillance for a significant period of time after his release from jail on April 19th? We do. How long did that go on, or is it still going on? We can't really say at this point. I anticipate it's something we'll find out in this lawsuit. But at the end of the day, when you spent such a long time in jail by yourself for a time that you haven't committed, you always are going to think that people are following you around. You are going to have paranoia. Leslie said in an interview last May that I'm just waiting for DPS to try and manufacture something else. And sure enough, they tried to double down on the crime lab work. Again, it didn't pass muster scientifically, but you tend to see things in the shadows when people have jumped out of the shadows and attacked you for no reason before.
If a jury awards damages, what's the percentage?
That's between us and Mr. Merritt. It's fair, it's adequate. We have a job to do, but believe me, Mr. Merritt is being treated very, very fairly. And I'd like to think, with all due respect, that the work that Ulysses and I did beginning October 1, his arraignment of last year, through the dismissal of all charges on April 25th, 2016, I think that really speaks to the fairness that he's been treated with and the result that he obtained.
From your description of his mental health right now, how is he able to work?
He's doing his best. I mean, he's working a full-time schedule. He is a very gracious employer who took him back, and I think he's really grateful for that. But it's the day-to-day things, Graham, when you brush your teeth, you get up, you go to work, that's all kind of automatic. And that's actually normalcy for him. And that feels great to do what Leslie Merritt pre-9/18 of 15 did. That's good for him. But it's when he goes out and people are harassing him and haranguing him with his children there. It's when people still think that he had something to do with the crimes based on a series of lies that were told to the public. That's when it's hard. When he sits at home quietly, that's when it's hard. Ulysses is really quiet today, so...
He's very reserved.
I know. They've said it all.
David, have you been involved in any litigation that may have made headlines in recent years that people might remember?
Probably so. Over here, please. Okay.
I can Google you.
Yeah, I mean, that's not a question that I prepared for.
Case that stands out.
One of the things in David's line of work, when you're suing governmental entities, a lot of times they're settlements, and settlements don't make headlines.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell. I achieved the 8th largest jury verdict in 2014 in a case called Najafi and DeRozier. Earlier this year, I achieved a $2 million jury verdict in a case called Sorti, all in the Maricopa County Superior Court.
Anything that can have made the public might
I handled a case called McGrath versus Scott that achieved a lot of publicity involving DPS a number of years back. I worked on a case involving Phoenix police shooting that got a lot of publicity called Salaya versus City of Phoenix. It was a police shooting case. Probably 7 or 8 years ago. I worked on a case. I worked on a case called Cervantes that got a lot of publicity involving a jail suicide in Maricopa County jails against Sheriff Arpaio and Correctional Health Services. So those are the cases that I think have gotten publicity.
Thanks, guys.